I'm Sarah Martinez, and what you're about to hear will make you question everything about family loyalty. My parents literally dragged me to donate half my liver to save my sister's life. But when the doctor said 6 words at the hospital, my entire world collapsed. Because Jessica wasn't just my abusive sister. She wasn't my sister at all. Growing up, Jessica could do no wrong and I could do no right. From the moment I could form memories, it was crystal clear that Jessica was the golden child, and I was whatever was left over. The family scapegoat, the disappointment, the one who could never measure up, no matter how hard I tried. Picture this, Jessica's 8th birthday party. Our backyard transformed into a princess wonderland with pink streamers, a bounce house, and 30 screaming kids. Mom spent weeks planning every detail, from the custom cake shaped like a castle to the party favors that probably cost more than my monthly allowance. When my birthday rolled around 3 months later, "Sarah, honey, we're going through a tight financial period right now. How about we just do something small at home?" Small meant a grocery store cake and dinner at Applebee's with just our immediate family. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was the pattern of my entire childhood. Jessica got elaborate Christmas mornings with piles of presents spilling out from under the tree. I got practical gifts, school supplies, clothes I needed anyway, maybe one toy if I was lucky. When Jessica brought home a report card with mostly B's and 1 A, Dad would beam with pride and stick it on the refrigerator with a gold star magnet. When I brought home straight A's, which happened most semesters, I'd get a distracted, "That's nice, honey," without Mom even looking up. From whatever Jessica needed help with, the financial favoritism was the most obvious, but the emotional manipulation cut deeper. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became Mom's favorite phrase. Whenever I showed any personality that wasn't complete compliance. If Jessica wanted to quit piano lessons after 2 months, it was, "Jessica is exploring her interests and finding her passion." When I wanted to quit soccer after 3 years of Dad never showing up to a single game, it was, "Sarah, you can't just quit everything when it gets difficult. You need to learn commitment." Jessica sailed through high school while I worked part-time at a local grocery store to save money for college. Not because we couldn't afford it, I know now that we could, but because Jessica needs to focus on her studies and her social development. Meanwhile, I was stocking shelves and dealing with difficult customers every weekend, supposedly learning valuable life lessons about hard work. When college acceptance letters came in, Jessica got into a decent state school with mediocre grades and no financial concerns. I got into 3 universities with partial scholarships, but the remaining costs were deemed too much of a burden on the family. So I went to community college for 2 years, working full-time to pay my own way, then transferred to finish my bachelor's degree in business. Jessica partied her way through 4 years of college, changed majors 3 times, and graduated with a degree in communications and no clear career path. Her student loans? Forgiven by Dad as a graduation gift. My student loans? "Well, Sarah, you chose a practical degree. You'll be able to pay those back with your business skills." The psychological impact of growing up this way is something I'm still unpacking in therapy. Every achievement felt hollow because it was never acknowledged. Every mistake felt catastrophic because it confirmed what I already suspected, that I was fundamentally flawed, inherently less worthy of love and attention than Jessica. I became a people pleaser to the extreme, bending over backwards to earn approval that never came. I couldn't trust my own judgment because everything I thought or felt was consistently dismissed or corrected. I remember being 16 and getting my first job at that grocery store. I was so proud to be earning my own money and contributing to the household. I came home after my first week with my paycheck, thinking maybe this would finally prove my worth. Instead of pride or encouragement, Mom's first question was, "How much are you going to contribute to Jessica's car fund? She really needs reliable transportation for her junior year." My own transportation to work? That was my problem to solve. The worst part was how they made it seem normal, even virtuous. "Sarah is our responsible one," they'd tell people, like being responsible at age 14 was some kind of natural talent rather than a survival mechanism. Jessica is more creative and free-spirited, so Sarah helps balance things out. They painted my parentification as a personality trait, my sacrifices as proof of my good character, rather than acknowledging the fundamental unfairness of the dynamic they'd created. But nothing prepared me for what happened when Jessica got sick. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. I was 25, living in my own apartment, finally starting to establish some independence and distance from the family chaos. The phone jolted me awake, and Mom's voice was shrill with panic. "Sarah, you need to get to the hospital right now. Jessica is in liver failure. The doctors say she needs a transplant immediately." I threw on clothes and drove through empty streets to the hospital, my mind racing. Liver failure at 27? Jessica had always been a party girl, but I never thought it was that serious. Sure, she drank heavily in college and never really stopped, but she was young and seemingly healthy. How could this happen so fast? When I arrived at the ICU, the scene was pure chaos. Mom was sobbing hysterically in Dad's arms while Jessica lay unconscious, connected to machines that beeped and hummed ominously. The doctor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, was trying to explain the situation to my parents, but they kept interrupting with questions and demands. "We need to test family members immediately," Dr. Anderson was saying. "Time is critical. The longer we wait, the less likely a transplant will be successful." That's when Mom grabbed my arm with surprising force. "Sarah's here. She'll do it. She'll donate part of her liver to save Jessica." Not a question, not a discussion, a declaration. Like my body was community property to be allocated as they saw fit. "Mrs. Martinez," Dr. Anderson said gently, "this is major surgery for the donor as well. There are significant risks, and we need to run compatibility tests first. Even then, it's ultimately Sarah's decision to make." Dad stepped forward, his face hard with determination. "She'll do it. Sarah has always been there for this family. She knows Jessica needs her." I stood there, still in my pajamas and jacket, trying to process what was happening. 24 hours earlier, I'd been living my quiet, independent life. Now I was being volunteered for major surgery to save the sister who'd spent our entire childhood treating me like an inconvenience. But here's the thing about growing up as the family scapegoat. You're conditioned to sacrifice yourself without question. The guilt machinery is so well-oiled that even thinking about your own needs feels selfish and wrong. Standing in that hospital room with Jessica fighting for her life, and my parents looking at me with expectation and desperation, I felt the familiar weight of family obligation settling on my shoulders. Of course, I heard myself saying, whatever Jessica needs. The next few days blurred together in a haze of medical tests, consultations, and increasingly invasive procedures. Blood draws, scans, psychological evaluations, meetings with surgeons who explained the donor process in clinical detail. They would remove approximately 60% of my liver, they explained. The organ would regenerate over time, but there were risks: bleeding, infection, bile duct injuries, even death, though that was rare. Mom and Dad hovered through every appointment, not to support me, but to ensure I didn't change my mind. They answered questions directed at me, minimized my concerns, and generally treated me like a child who couldn't be trusted to make the right decision. When I asked about taking a few days to think it over, Dad exploded. "Think it over? Your sister is dying, Sarah. Every day we delay reduces her chances of survival. What kind of person needs to think about saving their sister's life?" Jessica, when she was conscious and coherent, was no better. She never once thanked me or acknowledged the magnitude of what I was preparing to do. Instead, she complained about the hospital food, the uncomfortable bed, how the medication made her nauseous. When I tried to talk to her about my fears about the surgery, she rolled her eyes and said, "Sarah, you're being dramatic. People donate organs all the time. It's not that big of a deal." Not that big of a deal. Major abdominal surgery, months of recovery, permanent physical changes to my body, and significant health risks, all dismissed as no big deal because it was convenient for Jessica to think of it that way. The medical staff seemed increasingly uncomfortable with my family's pressure tactics, but they were focused on saving Jessica's life. Dr. Anderson pulled me aside before one of the final pre-surgical appointments. "Sarah, I need to ask you directly. Do you feel pressured into this decision? Because this has to be completely voluntary. If you have any doubts, any hesitation at all, we need to discuss it." I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her about the lifetime of conditioning that made it impossible for me to say no to my family, about the guilt and manipulation, about how I'd never been allowed to put my own needs first. But with Mom and Dad waiting just outside the door, with Jessica's life hanging in the balance, the words wouldn't come. "I want to help my sister," I said instead, which was true enough. Despite everything, I didn't want Jessica to die. But as we moved closer to the surgery date, something inside me started to rebel. Maybe it was finally being treated as an autonomous adult by the medical staff, having doctors ask for my consent rather than my parents' permission. Maybe it was the realization that this might be the most significant decision of my life, and I was making it under extreme duress. Or maybe it was just exhaustion from 25 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. When I asked for more time to think, that's when the mask completely fell off. I'll never forget the scene in the hospital family conference room. I'd requested a private meeting with Dr. Anderson to discuss my concerns about the surgery timeline. I wanted to understand if waiting a few more days for me to process everything would significantly impact Jessica's chances. It seemed like a reasonable request. This was major surgery after all, and I wanted to be mentally prepared. Mom and Dad somehow found out about the meeting and stormed into the room uninvited. When Dr. Anderson explained that I was asking for a brief delay to consider the decision more carefully, Mom lost it completely. She grabbed my medical folder from Dr. Anderson's desk and started tearing up the papers inside. "You're letting your sister die," she screamed, her voice echoing through the hospital corridors. What kind of monster thinks about herself when her sister is dying? These are just excuses, just selfish excuses. Dr. Anderson tried to intervene, reaching for the destroyed papers, but Mom was in a complete frenzy. She threw the torn pages at me, and they scattered across the floor like confetti. 25 years I've fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, and this is how you repay us? By letting Jessica die because you're scared of a little surgery? Then Dad stepped in, and his words cut deeper than Mom's hysteria. His voice was cold, controlled, deadly quiet. "Sarah, you are being a selfish mistake right now. Jessica is our real daughter, the one who matters. She has her whole life ahead of her, friends who love her, a future worth saving. What do you have? You live alone. You have no serious relationships, no real career prospects. Your life is disposable. Hers isn't." The room went completely silent. Even Mom stopped her ranting and stared at Dad, clearly shocked by the brutality of his words. Dr. Anderson looked like she wanted to call security. But I just sat there, feeling something inside me break open. Not in a painful way, but like a dam finally giving way to release pressure that had been building for decades. "Did you just say my life is disposable?" I asked quietly. Dad had the grace to look uncomfortable, but he didn't back down. "I'm saying that Jessica has more to live for. She's always been the family favorite for a reason. She's special, Sarah. She lights up every room she walks into. People love her. You're fine, but you're not Jessica. And you think that makes her life worth more than mine? I think that makes her life worth saving by any means necessary," he said. "Even if it means you have to make a sacrifice. That's what family does. We sacrifice for each other. And right now, your family needs you to stop being selfish and do the right thing." They literally dragged me to the pre-surgical prep area after that conversation. Mom on one arm, Dad on the other, marching me through hospital corridors. While I tried to process what had just happened, the nursing staff looked concerned but didn't intervene. Family disputes weren't their jurisdiction, and from the outside, it probably looked like parents supporting a nervous donor. But I wasn't nervous. I was having a complete psychological breakthrough. For the first time in my adult life, I was seeing my family clearly, without the distortion of guilt and conditioning. Dad had just explicitly told me that my life was worth less than Jessica's, that my role in the family was to be sacrificed when needed. Mom had destroyed my medical paperwork in a fit of rage rather than respect my right to informed consent. As they pushed me into a hospital gown and started the IV prep, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Pure, clean anger. Not guilt, not self-doubt, not the desperate need to please everyone. Just anger at being treated as a disposable resource by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. That's when I demanded the doctor run one more test. "I want a comprehensive blood compatibility panel," I told Dr. Anderson when she came to do the final pre-surgical check. "Not just the basic matching we've already done. I want the full genetic workup." Mom's face went white. "Sarah, we've already done all the necessary tests. You're overthinking this. Jessica doesn't have time for more delays." "It's standard procedure for living donor transplants," I said, looking directly at Dr. Anderson and ignoring my parents completely. I've been doing my own research. A full genetic compatibility panel reduces the risk of rejection and complications. If I'm doing this surgery, I want every possible precaution taken. Dr. Anderson nodded slowly. That's actually a very good point, Sarah. We can run additional genetic markers to ensure optimal compatibility. It will take about 48 hours for the results, but it could make a significant difference in the success rate. Dad stepped forward aggressively. 48 hours? Jessica could be dead in 48 hours. This is just Sarah trying to delay things because she's scared. Doctor, please, my daughter is dying. We need to proceed with the surgery immediately. Mr. Martinez, Dr. Anderson said firmly, Sarah is the donor, and she has the right to request additional testing that could improve the outcome for both patients. I actually recommend we run these tests. It's the responsible medical decision. The next 48 hours were hell. Mom and Dad alternated between aggressive pressure and emotional manipulation. They brought in extended family members to guilt me, had Jessica's friends call to tell me what a wonderful person she was, and even contacted my employer to tell them I might need extended time off for family medical issues, effectively backing me into a corner professionally. But something had shifted in me during that conference room confrontation. Every manipulation tactic they used just made me more certain that something was fundamentally wrong with this family dynamic. Normal families didn't treat potential organ donors like unwilling servants. Healthy parents didn't tell one child that her life was disposable compared to another's. I spent those 2 days researching liver donation, family coercion in medical decisions, and psychological manipulation in families. The more I read, the more I realized that my childhood wasn't just unfair, it was abusive. The differential treatment, the emotional neglect, the financial exploitation, the parentification, it all had names, clinical terms, that described patterns of family dysfunction. When Dr. Anderson called me into her office for the test results, I could tell from her expression that something was seriously wrong. She closed the door carefully and gestured for me to sit down. Sarah, we need to discuss these results, she said gently. The genetic compatibility panel has revealed some unexpected findings. My heart started pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. Somehow I already knew what she was going to tell me. The blood compatibility we found initially was within normal ranges for potential donors, but the extended genetic markers tell a different story. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Sarah, the genetic testing shows that you and Jessica are not compatible for organ donation because you are not biological relatives. The room seemed to tilt sideways. 6 words that changed everything. You are not biological relatives. What do you mean? I whispered, though part of me already understood. The genetic markers indicate that you and Jessica do not share biological parents. In fact, the genetic distance suggests you are not related at all. This makes organ donation between you medically inadvisable and frankly explains some of the blood work anomalies we noted but dismissed as within normal variation. I sat there in complete silence, watching my entire life reorganize itself in my mind. 25 years of feeling like I didn't fit, of being treated differently, of never measuring up. It all suddenly made perfect sense. Dr. Anderson, I said slowly, what you're telling me is that I was adopted, and my parents never told me. That would be the most likely explanation, yes. I'm required to halt the donation process immediately. It would be medically irresponsible to proceed given these findings. When we walked back into Jessica's room to deliver the news, the scene was like something out of a medical drama. Mom was sitting in the chair beside Jessica's bed, holding her hand and whispering reassurances. Dad was pacing by the window, checking his phone constantly for updates. Jessica was awake and surprisingly alert, probably due to new medications that were keeping her liver function stable for the moment. Dr. Anderson cleared her throat. I need to speak with everyone about Sarah's test results. The expectant silence was deafening. They all looked at me with such confidence, such certainty that I would save the day as I always had. Jessica even managed a weak smile, probably already planning her recovery and how she'd tell the story of her heroic sister who sacrificed part of her liver. The additional genetic testing has revealed that Sarah cannot be a donor for Jessica, Dr. Anderson said clearly. They are not genetically compatible because they are not biological siblings. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then pure rage. What do you mean? That's impossible. Run the test again. There's been a mistake. But I was watching my parents, and their reactions told me everything I needed to know. Dad's face went gray, and he sat down heavily, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. And Mom just collapsed in her chair. Mom's collapse wasn't the dramatic fainting you see in movies. It was worse, a complete psychological breakdown where she seemed to fold in on herself, her face crumpling as 25 years of lies crashed down around her. She started making these awful keening sounds, rocking back and forth in the hospital chair, while Dad sat frozen in stunned silence. Jessica, meanwhile, was having her own meltdown, but for entirely different reasons. "This is impossible," she screamed at Dr. Anderson. "Run the test again. There's been a contamination or something. Sarah is my sister. She has to donate her liver. I'm dying." But I was experiencing something I'd never felt before. Absolute clarity. Everything that had never made sense suddenly clicked into place like puzzle pieces finding their proper positions. The differential treatment, the way I'd always felt like an outsider looking in. The financial exploitation, even the way extended family members sometimes looked at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. "How long have you known?" I asked my parents quietly. Dad's mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. "Sarah, honey, this isn't... We can explain." "How long have you known?" I repeated, my voice getting stronger with each word. Mom finally stopped her rocking and looked up at me with mascara-streaked cheeks. "Since the beginning," she whispered. "We adopted you when you were 6 months old." The room exploded. Jessica started shrieking about how this changed nothing, that I still had to help her because we'd grown up together. Dr. Anderson was trying to restore order while nurses appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Dad was attempting to do damage control, stammering about how much they loved me and how I was their daughter in every way that mattered. But all I could focus on was that phrase, "since the beginning." They had lied to me for my entire conscious existence. Every birthday, every family photo, every moment when I'd wondered why I felt so different, they had known the truth and chosen deception. "I need some air," I announced, walking toward the door. "Sarah, wait!" Dad jumped up to follow me. "We need to talk about this. Don't make any rash decisions. I turned back to look at him, this man who had raised me, but never truly accepted me. Rash decisions, like donating half my liver to someone who isn't even my sister? Like that kind of rash decision? I left them there and walked out of the hospital into the parking lot, where I sat in my car and called in sick to work for the rest of the week. Then I drove home to my apartment and began the most important research project of my life. From victim to strategist in 24 hours, that's what the next phase felt like. The shock and emotional devastation were still there, but underneath them was something harder and more focused. I had been lied to, manipulated, and exploited for my entire life by people who were supposed to protect me. Now it was time to find out exactly how deep this deception went. My first call was to a family law attorney I found through online research. Jennifer Walsh specialized in adoption fraud and family financial abuse cases. When I explained my situation, she immediately agreed to see me that afternoon. "This is more common than you might think," Jennifer told me across her desk, surrounded by legal books and case files. Adoptive parents who never properly disclose adoption to their children, especially when there are biological children involved. The psychological abuse you're describing, the differential treatment, the parentification, the financial exploitation, these are classic patterns. She handed me a legal pad and pen. "I need you to write down everything you can remember about financial transactions, inheritance discussions, educational funding, anything involving money. Also document the emotional and psychological treatment differences between you and Jessica. We're going to need a complete picture." That evening, I started making lists, 25 years of memories reorganized through the lens of truth. The time when I was 16 and needed money for SAT prep, but Jessica got a car for her birthday instead. The college fund that supposedly didn't exist for me, but magically appeared for Jessica. The inheritance from Grandma Martinez that Dad said went to pay for family expenses when I was in college. Wait, Grandma Martinez? If I wasn't biologically related to the Martinez family, then Grandma Martinez wasn't actually my grandmother. So whose inheritance had really been used for family expenses? I called Jennifer the next morning. "I need to ask you something about inheritance law. If I was legally adopted, would that give me rights to inheritance from my biological family?" "Absolutely. Adopted children typically have full inheritance rights from both their biological and adoptive families, unless specifically excluded in legal documents." "Why do you ask?" "Because I'm starting to think my adoptive parents may have stolen more than just my childhood." The investigation that followed was like peeling back layers of an onion, each revelation more shocking than the last. Jennifer connected me with a private investigator who specialized in family fraud cases, and together we began reconstructing the truth of my life. The first breakthrough came when we obtained my original adoption records through a legal petition. I learned that my biological parents had died in a car accident when I was 4 months old, and that I had been placed for adoption through a private agency. More importantly, I discovered that my biological grandparents, my mother's parents, had established a substantial trust fund for me before their own deaths when I was 12. "Sarah," Jennifer said during our meeting the following week, "this trust fund should have been worth approximately $180,000 when you turned 18. With proper investment, it would be worth considerably more now. Do you have any record of receiving this inheritance? I laughed bitterly. I was working at a grocery store to pay for community college when I turned 18. If there had been $180,000 available, don't you think I would have noticed? The paper trail was extensive and damning. The Martinez family had been receiving disbursements from my trust fund for years, ostensibly for my care and education, but the money had been systematically diverted to pay for Jessica's expenses instead. Private school tuition that I never attended, medical procedures I never received, educational opportunities I was never offered, all paid for with my biological grandparents' money. But the financial fraud was just the beginning. The private investigator also uncovered information about my biological family that my adoptive parents had deliberately hidden from me. My birth parents, Michael and Catherine Thompson, had been successful professionals. He was an engineer, she was a pediatric nurse. They had specifically requested, in their will, that I be told about them when I reached adulthood, including details about their lives, their families, and their love for me. My biological grandmother, Catherine's mother, had fought the adoption initially, wanting to raise me herself. She had only agreed to the placement with the Martinez family after they promised to maintain contact and ensure I knew my family history. Instead, they had cut off all communication immediately after the adoption was finalized. Your biological grandmother lived until you were 22, the investigator told me. She never stopped trying to contact you. The Martinez family returned her letters unopened and refused to accept her phone calls. She died believing you wanted nothing to do with your biological family. That night, I cried harder than I had since I was a child, not just for myself, but for the grandmother who had loved me from a distance and died thinking I had rejected her, for the biological family connections I had been denied, for the 25 years of truth that had been stolen from me. But grief transformed into determination. It was time for some justice. The next morning, I called Jennifer with a clear plan. I want to file criminal charges for fraud and theft. I want to pursue civil action for the stolen inheritance, and I want to make sure they can never do this to another child. Sarah, I need to warn you that this is going to get very ugly. They're going to fight back, probably with everything they have. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for this my whole life without knowing it, I told her. They made me strong by trying to break me down. Now they're going to find out exactly how strong I really am. The first phase of legal action was swift and devastating. Jennifer filed a civil suit for recovery of the trust fund, plus interest and damages. The private investigator's evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, fraudulent documents, intercepted correspondence. There was no way for them to deny what they had done. Dad called me 3 days after he was served with papers. Sarah, we need to talk. This lawsuit is tearing the family apart. Can't we work something out privately? You mean like how we worked out my liver donation privately? I asked. Or like how you worked out stealing my inheritance privately? That money paid for your upbringing, he said desperately. Food, clothing, housing, medical care. We invested it in your future. Whose future, Dad? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you invested it in Jessica's private school, Jessica's college, Jessica's car, Jessica's apartment deposit. My future involved working retail jobs and student loans. You don't understand the sacrifices we made. No, I understand them perfectly now. You sacrificed my financial security to give Jessica advantages she didn't earn. You sacrificed my emotional well-being to make her feel special. You sacrificed my relationship with my biological family to maintain your lie. The only thing you didn't sacrifice was your own comfort. I hung up and blocked his number, but the legal action was just one front in my campaign for justice. I had also begun reaching out to extended family members, the Martinez cousins, aunts, and uncles who had watched me grow up as the difficult child, the one who never quite fit in. My cousin Maria was the first person I called. She was Dad's sister's daughter, about my age, and we had grown up attending the same family gatherings where Jessica always shined and I always seemed to disappoint. Maria, I need to tell you something that's going to sound crazy, I began, then laid out the entire story, the adoption, the lies, the financial theft, everything. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long I thought she had hung up. Finally, she spoke. "Oh my God, Sarah, this explains so much. I always wondered. You were so different from the rest of the family, but not in a bad way, just different. And the way your parents treated you compared to Jessica always bothered me, but I figured it wasn't my place to say anything." "What do you mean?" "I mean that every family gathering, Jessica got praised for the most basic accomplishments, while your actual achievements were barely acknowledged. Remember your high school graduation? You were valedictorian, but your parents spent the whole party talking about Jessica's boyfriend." I remember thinking it was weird, but I just chalked it up to family dynamics. She paused, then continued. "And there were conversations, times when I heard your mom and my mom talking, and your mom would say things like, 'Well, we've done our best with Sarah, but she's not really ours,' or 'Jessica is our real daughter.' I thought she was just talking about personality differences, but now you know she meant it literally. Sarah, I'm so sorry. If I had known, if any of us had known the truth, we would have said something. This is horrible." That conversation led to others. Uncle Roberto, who had always seemed uncomfortable with how I was treated, but never spoke up. Cousin Elena, who had wondered why I looked nothing like any blood relatives. Aunt Carmen, who had tried to include me in family activities, but was often overruled by my parents. One by one, I shared the truth with the extended family, and one by one, they began to see the past 25 years through a different lens. The family that had enabled my parents' differential treatment through silence and denial suddenly became a network of allies who were horrified by what they had witnessed and failed to question. But I saved the most important conversation for last. Jessica had been moved to a different hospital for specialized care, while they searched for a compatible donor through official channels. Her condition had stabilized somewhat, buying her time, but she was still facing an uncertain future. I called the hospital and asked to speak with her directly. "What do you want?" she said when they connected us, her voice weak but still carrying that familiar note of entitlement. "I want to talk to you about our parents." "Our parents who are being destroyed by your vindictive lawsuit, you mean?" "Sarah, I know you're hurt about the adoption thing, but this is insane. They love you. They raised you. How can you be so ungrateful?" "Ungrateful?" I almost laughed. "Jessica, they stole my inheritance to pay for your life. They lied to me for 25 years about who I am. They treated me like a second-class citizen my entire childhood, while elevating you to princess status. And when I finally had the chance to make a decision about my own body, they told me my life was disposable compared to yours. Tell me exactly what I should be grateful for. They gave you a home when you had nothing, she shot back. Your real parents didn't want you. My real parents died in a car accident, Jessica. They didn't abandon me. And the grandmother who did want me was blocked from contacting me by the people who gave me a home. There was silence on the other end. Then, in a smaller voice, I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, because they protected you from the truth the same way they hid it from me. The difference is, their lies benefited you and destroyed me. Sarah, I'm dying. Doesn't that matter to you at all? Of course it matters, but what matters more is that I'm finally living. For the first time in 25 years, I'm making decisions based on what's right for me, not what's convenient for everyone else. I hope you find a donor, Jessica. I genuinely do. But it's not going to be me, and not just because we're not biologically related. It's because I've finally learned that I don't owe anyone my life, my body, or my future just because they demand it. I hung up feeling something I had never experienced before. Complete peace with the decision I had made for myself. The legal victories came faster than I had expected. The evidence of financial fraud was so overwhelming that Dad's attorney advised him to settle rather than go to trial. The stolen trust fund, plus interest and penalties, came to over $340,000. But more satisfying than the money was the public record that would be created, documenting exactly what they had done. Jennifer also helped me file a complaint with the adoption agency that had placed me, reporting the family's failure to honor the terms of the adoption agreement. While it wouldn't change anything for me, it might protect other children in similar situations. The extended family consequences were swift and brutal. Once the truth came out, the Martinez family found themselves isolated from cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends, who were appalled by their deception. The community they had been part of for decades rejected them almost unanimously. Dad lost his position as a deacon at their church when the pastor learned about the fraud. Mom was quietly removed from her volunteer positions at various charitable organizations. Their marriage, strained by the financial pressure of legal fees and the social ostracism, began to crumble publicly. Dad moved out of the family home and into a small apartment, while Mom remained in the house that was now at risk of foreclosure due to their legal expenses. But the most satisfying consequence was completely unexpected. 3 weeks after I received the settlement check, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Sarah Thompson?" Thompson, my birth name, which I had started using again on legal documents. "Yes, this is Sarah." "Sarah, my name is Patricia Thompson. I'm your father's sister, your biological aunt. I've been looking for you for 23 years. The conversation that followed changed everything yet again, but this time in the most beautiful way possible. Patricia explained that the entire Thompson family had been searching for me since my biological grandmother's death. They had hired private investigators, filed legal petitions, and never given up hope of finding me. "We knew the Martinez family had cut off contact," Patricia told me, "but we assumed you had been told about us and simply didn't want a relationship. When we learned the truth, that you never knew we existed, we immediately began searching again." She told me about my biological parents, sharing stories and photos I had never seen. My father had been working on a master's degree in environmental engineering when he died, hoping to develop clean water systems for developing countries. My mother had been passionate about pediatric cancer research, volunteering at children's hospitals in her spare time. "They would have been so proud of you," Patricia said, "the way you've overcome what was done to you, the strength you've shown. That's their legacy living on in you." But the most incredible revelation came when she told me about the rest of my biological family. I had 2 cousins near my age, an uncle who was a successful architect, and a great-aunt who was a retired federal judge. They had maintained close relationships with each other, gathering annually to remember my parents and to hope that someday they would find me. "There's something else," Patricia said. "Your biological grandmother left specific instructions in her will about what should happen if you were ever located. Sarah, there's another inheritance waiting for you. She never stopped believing we would find you." The family reunion took place on a Saturday afternoon at Patricia's house in Portland, 3 hours from where I lived. I was more nervous walking up her front steps than I had been during any of the legal proceedings with my adoptive family. These were strangers who were also my blood relatives. What if we didn't like each other? What if the connection I was hoping for didn't exist? But the moment Patricia opened the door, I felt something I had never experienced before. Immediate, uncomplicated acceptance. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You have your mother's smile and your father's eyes. Welcome home, sweetheart." The afternoon was filled with photo albums, stories, and the gradual construction of my real family history. I learned that my love of reading came from my father, who had been a voracious reader of science fiction and environmental policy. My organizational skills and attention to detail were inherited from my mother, who had been known for her meticulous patient care. My tendency to advocate for underdogs was apparently a family trait. My great-aunt had built her legal career on pro bono work for disadvantaged clients. "We've been talking about you for decades," my cousin David told me. "Wondering what you looked like, what you were interested in, whether you were happy. We've missed so much of your life, but we want to be part of whatever comes next." The inheritance from my biological grandmother was substantial, enough to ensure I would never have to worry about financial security again. But more importantly, it came with a letter she had written to me before her death, sealed and waiting for the day an I was found. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you are reading this, then the prayers I have said every night for 20 years have finally been answered. I have thought about you every single day since you were taken from us, and I have never stopped believing that someday we would be reunited." The letter continued for 3 pages, filled with her love, her hopes for my future, and her determination that I should know how deeply I had been wanted and cherished by my biological family. She had created the inheritance not just to provide for me financially, but to ensure that I would have the resources to build whatever life I wanted, free from the constraints of people who might try to control or manipulate me. Reading those words, I realized that my biological grandmother had somehow known, had anticipated that I might need the means to escape from a difficult situation. Her final gift to me was freedom. That evening, driving home from Portland, with my head full of new family stories and my phone full of contact information for relatives who actually wanted to know me, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete and total peace with who I was and where I came from. I wasn't the broken, inadequate person my adoptive family had convinced me I was. I wasn't the disposable daughter whose life mattered less than everyone else's needs. I was Sarah Thompson, daughter of Michael and Catherine, granddaughter of Eleanor, niece of Patricia, cousin of David and Rachel. I was part of a family that had loved me from a distance for 25 years and was ready to love me up close for whatever time we had left. But more than that, I was finally, completely, authentically myself. The woman I was meant to be before lies and manipulation tried to reshape me into something smaller and more convenient for other people. Jessica did eventually receive a liver transplant from an organ donor who was a medical match. Her recovery was long and difficult, and she would have ongoing health challenges for the rest of her life, but she survived. I felt genuine relief when I learned the surgery had been successful, because despite everything, I had never wanted her to die. My adoptive parents divorced 6 months after the lawsuit was settled. Dad moved to Arizona to live near his brother, while Mom remained in the family home, now heavily mortgaged to pay legal fees. They never apologized for what they had done to me, never acknowledged the damage they had caused. In their minds, I remained the ungrateful adopted daughter who had destroyed the family rather than sacrifice herself for Jessica. I was perfectly fine with their version of the story. The extended Martinez family maintained contact with me, but I set clear boundaries about what kind of relationships I wanted. Some cousins and aunts respected my need for distance, while others pushed for more connection than I was ready to provide. I learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize my own emotional well-being, and to end conversations that became manipulative or demanding. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own judgment, the voice inside me that had always known something was wrong, that had questioned the differential treatment and the family dynamics. That voice had been right all along. I would never again dismiss my instincts in favor of other people's comfort. I'm not the same broken girl they tried to sacrifice. I'm Sarah Thompson, and I'm living the life my biological parents would have wanted for me: free, authentic, and surrounded by people who love me exactly as I am. They wanted me to be their disposable daughter, their emergency organ bank, their convenient scapegoat. Instead, I became the woman I was always meant to be, and I've never been happier.